What does a figure shrouded in mystery, worshipped by some as the pinnacle of divinity and feared by others as the embodiment of evil, have to tell us about our own quest for meaning and power? The deity known as ABRAXAS, an entity whose origins are lost in the mists of time and whose representations oscillate between the sacred and the profane, is more than a mere artifact of ancient Gnostic beliefs or an obscure esoteric symbol. She is a portal to a deeper understanding of the nature of reality, the duality that permeates our existence, and the latent potential within each of us, a potential that, when fully awakened, can challenge conventional notions of good and evil, light and darkness. Our delve into this cosmic enigma will not be limited to cataloging ancient legends or unearthing forgotten relics. Instead, we will embark on an investigative journey to unravel the multiple layers of meaning that ABRAXAS carries, especially through the lens of one of the most controversial and influential occultists of the 20th century, ALEISTER CROWLEY. Crowley, a man who called himself the Great Beast 66, saw in ABRAXAS not an external god to be worshipped, but an inner principle, a reflection of the totality of the universe and, most crucially, of the sovereign self. He believed that the key to self-realization and transcendence of human limitations lay in the integration of all aspects of existence, including those that society deems dark or unacceptable. This revolutionary perspective sheds unexpected light on the nature of spiritual power and the path to attaining a state of enlightenment, a path that, for Crowley, lay not through the denial of hell, but through its embracing integration with heaven. The relevance of ABRAXAS, and by extension Crowley's work, transcends the niche of occult scholars. It touches on fundamental questions that resonate with us all. How do we deal with the fear of the unknown? How do we define what is good and what is evil in a complex and often ambiguous world? And perhaps most provocatively, what is our true, untapped potential? The story of ABRAXAS is a tapestry woven with threads of Gnosticism, Hermeticism, alchemy, and later, the intricate philosophies of Crowley, who reinterpreted it and brought it to the center of his magical and religious system. Thelema. Understanding ABRAXAS is, in many ways, understanding a symbolic language that has been used for millennia to express profound truths about the human condition and the cosmos. It is recognizing that the forces that shape our universe and our own minds are far more multifaceted and less binary than we often allow ourselves to believe. Through this exploration, we will uncover how ABRAXAS, with his ambiguous nature and his name charged with numerical power, became a beacon for those seeking to transcend imposed dualities and achieve a form of personal divinity, a state of being where the totality of the universe is reflected in the individual. The goal here is not to convert anyone to a specific belief, but rather to illuminate a fascinating corner of human history and psychology, a corner that invites us to question our own definitions of divinity, power, and the very nature of existence. The question that arises is, how can an entity that appears on ancient amulets, often depicted with the head of a rooster, the body of a man, and the legs of a serpent, and whose followers were labeled heretics, offer such profound insights into human potential? The answer lies in the very essence of Gnosticism, the birthplace of ABRAXAS. Gnostics viewed the material world as a prison, an imperfect creation of an inferior deity, and salvation as the liberation of the spirit through knowledge, gnosis. For many Gnostics, ABRAXAS was the supreme deity, the great archon, who ruled the universe and whose 7 heavens represented the levels of imprisonment of the human spirit. However, Crowley's interpretation radically broke with this view. He reinterpreted ABRAXAS as the sum of all things, the unifying principle encompassing both light and shadow, good and evil, creation and destruction. For him, ABRAXAS was not a cosmic tyrant, but the representation of totality, the absolute, which, in its plenitude, cannot be contained by any human definition or moral judgment. The numbering attributed to the name ABRAXAS, in Greek, Alpha Beta Rho Alpha Xi Alpha Sigma, 1 plus 2 plus 100 plus 1 plus 60 plus 1 plus 200, 365, was also significant to the Gnostics, representing the 365 days of the year, or the celestial spheres. Crowley, in turn, saw this number as a symbol of the completeness and cyclical totality of the universe. This dissociation of the original negative connotation and the adoption of ABRAXAS as an archetype of supreme power and self-realization is the starting point for our exploration. By unraveling ABRAXAS's historical and philosophical origins and understanding how Crowley integrated him into his mystical system, we will begin to glimpse how this enigmatic figure can challenge us to look beyond appearances, to embrace the wholeness of our own nature, and to recognize the power inherent in our own awakened consciousness. This is not just a story of ancient gods and demons. It is an exploration of the power of the mind, the search for truth, and the journey to inner sovereignty. The genealogy of ABRAXAS is a fascinating labyrinth, intertwining with minority Gnostic sects and philosophies that sought an alternative understanding of the divine, radically distinct from orthodox Abrahamic doctrines. The earliest traces of ABRAXAS appear on amulets and gems from the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD, a period of intense intellectual and spiritual effervescence in the Mediterranean. These early appearances portray him not as a demon, but rather as a figure of cosmic power, often associated with the transmigration of souls and the architecture of the universe. The etymology of the name itself is uncertain, but theories range from a derivation from ancient Egyptian to a combination of sacred syllables in Greek or Hebrew. For followers of Valentinian Gnosticism, for example, ABRAXAS was the name of an aeon, a divine emanation, or even the name of the demiurge, the entity who, in his ignorance or malice, created the imperfect material world. This duality of interpretation, sometimes as a beneficent supreme power, sometimes as a flawed creator, already foreshadowed the complexity that would surround this figure. The way ABRAXAS was visually represented provides crucial clues to his multifaceted nature. The rooster's head symbolized vigilance and the ability to herald the dawn, the human body represented created form, and the serpent's legs alluded to hidden wisdom, healing, and in some traditions, primordial cunning. This amalgamation of elements was not arbitrary. It reflected a worldview where polarities coexisted and complemented each other. Unlike traditional deities, ABRAXAS did not fit into an organized pantheon, nor did he respond to a single set of dogmas. His worship and interpretation varied greatly among different Gnostic groups and later, other mystical currents. This generated an atmosphere of mystery and, for outside observers, suspicion. The early church, in its struggle to consolidate its own doctrines, labeled the Gnostics as heretics, and their deities, including ABRAXAS, were demonized or simply dismissed as superstition. This demonization, paradoxically, ultimately gave ABRAXAS an aura of forbidden power and a lasting fascination for those seeking spiritual paths outside the mainstream. The association with the number 365, as noted, was central to many Gnostic interpretations, linking ABRAXAS to cosmic cycles and the celestial order. This sacred numerology was not just a game of numbers, but a way of deciphering the underlying structure of reality, where each name, each concept, possessed an intrinsic numerical vibration that revealed its place in the grand scheme of the universe. Exploring this genealogy and Abraxas's early interpretations is, therefore, like following a river that, at its source, was clear and turned toward the sky, but which, along its course, was obscured by later interpretations and the passage of time, acquiring new layers of meaning and, for some, a sinister reputation that belied its origin. The transformation of the figure of Abraxas from a Gnostic deity to a central archetype in ALEISTER CROWLEY's work represents one of the most intriguing chapters in his history. Crowley, an avid student of occultism, comparative religion, and esoteric philosophies, found in Abraxas an echo of his own quest for the great work, the process of self-realization and union with the divine. He saw Abraxas not as an external entity to be served, but as a force inherent in existence, a principle that embodied wholeness and the overcoming of dualities. For Crowley, Abraxas was the embodiment of his holy guardian angel, the highest and most authentic part of the self, with which each individual should identify and become. This reinvention was no mere whim. It was grounded in a profound meditation on the symbols and philosophies surrounding Abraxas. Crowley reinterpreted the allegory of the watchful rooster not as a figure of celestial authority, but as the ability of consciousness to recognize truth amidst illusion. The serpent's legs ceased to be a sign of cunning or danger, and became a symbol of serpentine wisdom. The Kundalini, the primordial energy dormant within the human being, whose activation was crucial for enlightenment. The key to Crowley's approach lay in his philosophy of true will. He postulated that each human being possesses a unique and inalienable will, a cosmic purpose to be fulfilled. The discovery and manifestation of this will was the supreme goal of life. In Abraxas, Crowley saw the ultimate symbol of this realized will, the entity that, in its totality, is not subject to external moral categories, but operates according to its own intrinsic law. The very word Abraxas, with its numerical resonance and linguistic mystery, became for him a mantra, a key to unlocking hidden insights. He utilized the figure of Abraxas in rituals, writings, and as inspiration for his teachings on the nature of the divine and the self. By integrating Abraxas into his Thelemic system, Crowley effectively declared that the divine is not confined to the heavens or sacred scriptures, but resides in the totality of human experience, including those aspects deemed dark or undesirable by society. This perspective radically challenged the notions of sin and redemption, proposing in their place the acceptance and integration of all facets of being as a path to divinity. The practical application of Abraxas's philosophy, as conceived by Crowley, transcends the mere study of esoteric texts or the practice of formal rituals. It manifests itself in how an individual chooses to live their life, especially in the face of internal conflicts and external pressures. Consider, for example, the situation of dealing with impulses considered negative or socially unacceptable, such as anger, excessive ambition, or sexual desire. Conventional morality often dictates the suppression or denial of these forces, labeling them sin or error. The perspective inspired by Abraxas, however, suggests a different path. The recognition of these energies as an integral part of the totality of existence and of the self itself. For a practitioner, the point would not be to repress anger, but rather to understand it, investigate its origins, and channel it constructively, perhaps in an act of courage, in the defense of a just cause, or even as a catalyst for artistic creativity. Likewise, ambition need not be seen as a defect, but as a driving force that, when aligned with true will, can lead to the achievement of grand purposes. This approach involves a profound exercise in self-analysis and self-acceptance. It's not about justifying destructive behaviors, but about demystifying the forces that drive them and learning to work with them rather than being controlled by them. ABRAXAS, as a symbol of wholeness, invites us to embrace our shadow selves, to integrate the aspects of ourselves that have been repressed or that cause discomfort. This can translate into significant personal challenges: facing deep fears, confronting limiting beliefs acquired in childhood or through education, and redefining what it means to be good or bad outside of social conventions. For example, an individual may discover that a personality trait considered arrogant by others is actually a manifestation of genuine self-confidence, necessary to defend their will. Mastery lies in discerning the difference and using this strength wisely, without falling into self-indulgence or tyranny. The practice becomes a continuous act of inner alchemy, where the raw metals of the psyche are transmuted into spiritual gold, not through rejection, but through integration and purification. ABRAXAS's wisdom is that divinity is not achieved by denying one part of ourselves, but by understanding and transcending all parts, recognizing the underlying unity that connects them. The name ABRAXAS, in its sonority and its multiple interpretations, carries a suggestive power that resonates at different levels of the human psyche. The numerical aspect, 365, evokes the totality of the solar cycle, the constant flow of time, and, by extension, the breadth of human experience. Crowley, in embracing this number, saw it not simply as a temporal marker, but as a reflection of the infinity of possibilities that reside in the universe and within the individual. This conception of ABRAXAS as the sum of all, the principle that contains within itself all polarities, without limiting itself to any of them, directly challenges the human tendency to categorize and judge. Many of our struggles and suffering arise from our insistence on imposing rigid dualities on reality. Right versus wrong, good versus evil, light versus dark. ABRAXAS, at its core, suggests that this division is a fundamental illusion. He invites us to recognize the underlying unity that connects all opposites. The practical application of this in everyday life is immense. Now consider how this understanding of ABRAXAS can be applied when facing the duality inherent in creation and destruction. Rather than fearing destruction as something intrinsically negative, we can begin to see it as a necessary component of the creative cycle. An idea, a project, or even a belief structure may need to be destroyed to make way for something new and more evolved. For an artist, this might mean tearing up a canvas and starting over, not out of failure, but out of recognition that the first attempt fell short of the complete vision. For an individual, it might mean leaving behind a relationship, a career, or a way of life that no longer serves their true will, even if it causes temporary pain and uncertainty. ABRAXAS reminds us that the energy that destroys is also the energy that creates. The force that disintegrates a star is the same force that forms new galaxies. This perspective allows for greater resilience in the face of life's inevitable losses and transformations. Instead of resisting change with fear, we can approach it with a deeper wisdom, recognizing that every ending is also a new beginning. Another crucial aspect is the nature of the profane in relation to the sacred. Many traditional religions establish a strong dichotomy between what is considered sacred, temples, rituals, sacred texts, and what is profane, everyday life, worldly pleasures, the body. Crowley's philosophy, inspired by ABRAXAS, seeks to unify these spheres, He believed that the sacred can be found in all things, and that the search for divinity should not be confined to specific times or places, but rather infuse all of existence. This translates into the idea that any act, when performed with full awareness, intention, and alignment with the true will, can become a sacred act. Eating, loving, working, even what is socially considered mundane, can be a form of worship or manifestation of the divine. For a musician, this might mean that creating a melody that touches one's soul is a deeply spiritual act, as sacred as any formal prayer. Or for a cook, preparing a nutritious and flavorful meal with love and mindfulness is a way to honor life and nourish vital energy. ABRAXAS, therefore, challenges us to dismantle the artificial separation between the sacred and the profane, recognizing the divinity immanent in all creation. The very visual representation of ABRAXAS, with its fusion of animal and human elements, forces us to confront our own multifaceted nature. The Gnostic figure with a rooster's head, human body, and serpent's legs is a powerful archetype of awakened consciousness, capable of transcending the limitations of physical form and connecting with primordial wisdom. The rooster symbolizes the proclamation of truth, the vigilance that shatters the illusions of the night. The human body represents the manifested form, the seat of earthly experience. Serpents, often associated with hidden wisdom, healing, and vital energy, Kundalini, refer to the capacity for regeneration and transformation. Crowley interpreted this image as the totality of being, where all facets, rational, instinctive, and spiritual, coexist and integrate. He saw in ABRAXAS the representation of man who has become fully aware of his own divinity, capable of governing himself and acting in the world according to his true will. This image serves as a visual reminder that we are not mere human beings, but divine sparks in material form, possessing a latent potential for enlightenment and mastery. The practical application of this understanding is revealed in how we approach our most basic instincts and drives, rather than repressing or fearing our sexual, aggressive, or self-preservative impulses. The ABRAXAS-inspired perspective invites us to understand them, honor them as natural forces, and, crucially, channel them constructively. For example, sexual energy, often seen as taboo or a source of shame, can be understood as the lifeblood of creation and passion. Rather than suppressing it, an adept could seek to consciously integrate it into their life, whether through healthy and vibrant relationships or by channeling this creative energy into art, work, or the pursuit of knowledge. Likewise, aggression, when stripped of its purely destructive connotations, can be recognized as the driving force behind courage, self-defense, and the determination to overcome obstacles. The key is to discern the difference between the uncontrolled expression and the conscious manifestation of these energies. ABRAXAS's wisdom lies in teaching us that true divinity comes not from denying our dark parts, but from their conscious integration, recognizing that the energy behind a seemingly negative impulse can be the same energy that drives creation and self-transformation. ABRAXAS's concept of wholeness also offers us a new lens through which to examine the role of error and failure. In many cultures, error is equated with evil, with moral failing. However, ABRAXAS's view suggests that error is not inherently negative, but rather an essential part of the process of learning and evolution. The energy that leads to failure is the same energy that drives experimentation and discovery. Crowley, for example, was quick to admit his own mistakes and failures throughout his long life. For him, each failure was a learning opportunity, a chance to refine his will and adjust his path. ABRAXAS's perspective encourages us to abandon the paralyzing fear of error and embrace experimentation. Consider a scientist who performs hundreds of experiments that fail to produce the expected result before making a crucial discovery. Each of these failures was, in fact, a necessary step toward success. ABRAXAS teaches us that perfection is not the absence of error, but the ability to learn from it and continue moving forward. By accepting the duality of existence, we recognize that what may seem like a mistake today may prove to be the basis for significant progress tomorrow. The figure of ABRAXAS, especially as recontextualized by ALEISTER CROWLEY, serves as a powerful antidote to the human tendency to dichotomize the world into good and evil, sacred and profane, spirit and matter. Crowley, influenced by esoteric traditions that saw the underlying unity in all things, reinterpreted ABRAXAS not as an external god to be worshipped or feared, but as the unifying principle of existence itself, the wholeness that encompasses and transcends all dualities. This vision fundamentally challenges conventional notions of morality, suggesting that true divinity and self-realization come not from the rejection or purging of aspects considered dark or lower of existence, but rather from their full acceptance and integration. The key for Crowley was the discovery and expression of the true will, the unique purpose of each individual. ABRAXAS, in his conception, was the archetype of this realized will, the cosmic force that does not submit to external judgments, but operates according to its own intrinsic and complete nature. The number 365, associated with ABRAXAS, goes beyond a simple count of days. It represents the totality of the cosmic cycle, the fullness of the year, and, metaphorically, the encompassing nature of all possible experiences. Crowley saw this number as representing the totality of the universe, a reflection of the concept of as above, so below. For him, the microcosm, the individual, was a mirror of the macrocosm, the universe. Therefore, by understanding the nature of ABRAXAS as the totality, the individual could aspire to reflect this same totality within themselves. This means embracing not only the praiseworthy and brilliant aspects of oneself, but also those considered flawed, dark, or undesirable. For example, the capacity to feel anger or envy, rather than being suppressed as a sin, can be understood as a form of energy that, when recognized and channeled correctly, can propel action or self-protection. Sexuality, often seen as something to be repressed or controlled, can be understood as a powerful life force, the energy of creation, which can be channeled into artistic expression, passion for life, or deep connection with others. ABRAXAS invites us to see these energies not as enemies to be defeated, but as essential components of our wholeness, which, when consciously integrated, bring us closer to the fulfillment of our true will. Another profound implication of this vision is the demystification of the separation between the sacred and the profane. Many religious traditions establish a rigid boundary between what is considered holy and what is mundane or sinful. Crowley, however, argued that the sacred can be found in all things, and that everyday life, when lived with full awareness and alignment with true will, can be a form of divine experience. The practice of a skilled craftsman, a physician's dedication to the care of his patients, an artist's passion for his creation, all these acts, when performed with intention and mastery, can be considered sacred rituals. ABRAXAS, as the totality, unifies these spheres, reminding us that divinity is not confined to temples or ceremonies, but is immanent in all existence. This means that every moment of life can be an opportunity to connect with the divine and to manifest one's true will. By embracing the totality of our experience, including that which society might label as profane, we begin to break down the artificial barriers that prevent us from accessing our highest potential. The quest for divinity, therefore, becomes a journey of integration and radical acceptance of oneself and the universe, reflecting the all-encompassing and unconditional nature of ABRAXAS. The fascination with ABRAXAS, especially from Crowley's perspective, lies in its ability to act as a catalyst for exploring aspects of the human psyche that are often overlooked or suppressed by prevailing social and moral norms. Rather than simply accepting conventional definitions of virtue and vice, the ABRAXAS-inspired approach encourages a deeper investigation into the origin and function of these psychological shadows. A concrete example of this is how we deal with feelings of envy. Traditionally, envy is seen as a reprehensible moral failing, a poison that corrodes the soul and damages relationships. However, from the perspective of ABRAXAS as the totality, envy can be recontextualized. It can be interpreted not as an inherent flaw, but as a sign that something we desire is present in another person, indicating a longing for growth or acquisition in a specific area of life. The energy behind envy, rather than being a destructive impulse that leads us to wish harm on others, can be redirected as a powerful motivator for self-development. Consider a young artist who feels envious of the recognition another artist receives. Instead of being consumed by bitterness, they can analyze what specifically they admire in the other's work, and use this analysis as a map to hone their own skills, set clearer goals, and intensify their dedication to their art. Envy, in this context, becomes a fuel for positive ambition and the pursuit of excellence, revealing a practical application of integrating shadows into a path of self-realization, a path that resonates with ABRAXAS's all-encompassing breadth. Furthermore, the conception of ABRAXAS as a principle that encompasses all things, including what is considered chaotic or destructive, offers us a new perspective on how to approach crises and radical transformations in life. The natural human tendency is to resist disorder and seek stability. However, many of the most significant advances in the history of science, art, and human evolution itself have emerged from periods of apparent chaos. What appears to be disintegration may actually be a prelude to a new, more complex order. Consider, for example, the field of quantum physics, where reality at its most fundamental level exhibits behavior that defies classical intuition and appears inherently chaotic or probabilistic. The discovery and acceptance of these properties has not diminished our understanding of the universe. On the contrary, it has expanded it immensely. Similarly, in our personal lives, a divorce, the loss of a job, or an existential crisis, although painful and disorienting, can be the catalyst for a profound and positive restructuring of our lives. Rather than fearing these upheavals, ABRAXAS's philosophy encourages us to embrace them as moments of creative potential, where old structures are dissolved to make way for new ways of being and living, more aligned with our true will. Thus, the very energy that dismantles can be seen as the driving force behind reconstruction and evolution. Another aspect worth exploring lies in how ABRAXAS, through Crowley, challenges the notion of a fixed and immutable self. Society tends to encourage us to build a solid identity based on consistent roles, beliefs, and behaviors. However, life is a continuous flow of change and transformation. ABRAXAS, like the principle of wholeness, suggests that our true nature is multifaceted and constantly evolving, similar to the complexity and fluidity of the cosmos itself. He invites us to embrace this fluidity, to recognize that we are not limited by who we were yesterday or by who others expect us to be today. This release from a rigid identity can be particularly liberating when dealing with social expectations. If you are seen as an introvert by your friends, but feel a calling to express yourself in more extroverted ways in certain contexts, ABRAXAS's philosophy encourages you to honor this impulse without feeling guilty or the need to conform to a predetermined box. He teaches us that our most authentic identity is one that embraces all our facets, allowing us to transition between different modes of being as our will guides us, rather than remaining trapped in a static persona. This acceptance of impermanence and the multiplicity of the self is a crucial step toward personal mastery and the realization of the all-encompassing potential symbolized by ABRAXAS. Exploring the totality of ABRAXAS takes us into fascinating territory where the duality between what is perceived as occult knowledge and scientific knowledge dissolves. Crowley, in his relentless pursuit of unlocking the mysteries of the universe, saw these two spheres not as mutually exclusive, but as complementary. He believed that science, with its empirical method and its search for observable laws, offered an understanding of the how of phenomena, while esoteric and mystical traditions, including his interpretation of ABRAXAS, unraveled the why, the cosmic motivation and deeper meaning behind existence. Now consider how this synthesis applies to our understanding of reality. For example, while modern physics unravels the complex interactions of subatomic particles and the laws governing the cosmos on a large scale, the philosophy of ABRAXAS suggests that there is a primary energy or intention behind these laws. The fact that matter obeys certain mathematical regularities, allowing science to predict the behavior of the universe, can be seen as a reflection of the order inherent in the whole. Crowley would argue that science gives us the tool to describe the map of the universe, but occult wisdom gives us the key to understanding the explorer's purpose and the nature of the Earth represented on that map. Furthermore, this integrative approach is crucial to demystifying the belief that the pursuit of power, in any sense, is inherently negative or associated with dark forces. Science, in turn, has been instrumental in the development of technologies that grant humanity immense power, from nuclear energy to global communication tools. However, the use of these technologies often raises ethical and moral questions. ABRAXAS, as the totality, is neither inherently good nor evil. It is pure force and potentiality. Crowley saw in ABRAXAS the representation of individual sovereignty, the right of each being to govern themselves and to use their inherent energies to fulfill their true will. Therefore, power itself is not the problem, but rather how it is understood and applied. Science may give us the power to build a bomb, but wisdom, as sought through a deep understanding of archetypes like ABRAXAS, can guide us to use that power in ways that serve creation and evolution rather than destruction. This distinction is vital. Science provides the means, while an integrated philosophy of life, embracing the totality of ABRAXAS, can provide the wisdom and intention for constructive use of this power. It is an invitation to accompany the pursuit of scientific knowledge with a deep exploration of consciousness and purpose. Another important layer in understanding ABRAXAS as the totality, especially in the Crowleyan context, is the way it reconfigures the relationship between the individual and the collective. Conventional morality often teaches us to prioritize the common good, or to submit our individual desires to the will of the majority or an external authority. ABRAXAS, on the other hand, by representing the sovereignty of the self, emphasizes the primacy of the individual's true will. Crowley did not advocate unbridled selfishness, but rather radical authenticity. He believed that when each individual fully aligns with their true will and manifests it in its entirety, the natural result is a unique and valuable contribution to the collective. Consider nature. A lush forest does not form when each tree tries to imitate the other or submit to a centralized plan. It flourishes when each tree expresses its unique nature, the height it reaches, the shape of its branches, the depth of its roots, growing in harmony with its environment, but without losing its individuality. Similarly, the ideal society, in ABRAXAS's vision, is not a homogeneous mass, but a vibrant ecosystem of sovereign individuals, each contributing their unique skills and perspectives. Order, in such a society, emerges spontaneously from the authentic expression of each being, rather than being imposed externally. This is a direct application of the idea that the microcosm, the individual, reflects the macrocosm, society, and that harmony on a larger scale arises from the full manifestation of integrity on a smaller scale. Furthermore, the figure of ABRAXAS confronts us with the nature of truth itself. In a world where information is abundant and narratives often conflict, the search for objective truth can seem an insurmountable challenge. Crowley, influenced by Gnostic systems that valued inner knowledge and direct experience, saw truth not as a set of external dogmas, but as something to be discovered and realized by one's own consciousness. ABRAXAS, as the totality, embodies this immanent truth. He suggests that ultimate truth resides not in a specific doctrine, be it religious, scientific, or philosophical, but in the very experience of being, in the totality of existence. This leads us to question our own certainties and to be open to the possibility that multiple perspectives may contain fragments of a greater truth. For example, a scientific discovery that contradicts an established religious belief does not necessarily invalidate one of them. Instead, it may point to a deeper, more comprehensive understanding of reality, where both perspectives fit into a larger picture, similar to how quantum mechanics and general relativity describe different but complementary aspects of the physical universe. This epistemological humility, this openness to complexity and ambiguity, is a direct reflection of the totalizing nature of ABRAXAS, which does not limit itself to a single definition or truth, but embraces the totality of being and knowledge. As we contemplate the journey that has brought us to this point, we realize that the figure of ABRAXAS, unveiled in its multiple layers, transcends mere historical curiosity or esoteric exoticism. It presents itself not as an enigma to be deciphered and then discarded, but as a continual invitation to reflect on the very fabric of existence and our place within it. The nuances of its representation and the unfolding of its meaning, especially through the lens of figures like Crowley, propel us beyond the simplistic dichotomies that often shape our perception of the world and ourselves. The intricate web of symbols and philosophies emanating from this deity evokes a deeper understanding of the interconnectedness of all things, a recognition that the totality of the universe in its glory and its shadows finds a resonant echo within every awakened consciousness. As we progress, clarity about the nature of this archetype intensifies, not as a single immutable truth, but as a dynamic principle of unity. The diverse schools of thought surrounding it converge on the idea that the fullness of human experience lies in the ability to embrace complexity, to integrate what was previously perceived as opposite or antagonistic. The journey we have taken has immersed us in a landscape where the boundaries between the known and the mysterious, between the self and the cosmos, become increasingly fluid, paving the way for a richer appreciation of the tapestry of life. Reflecting on this journey thus far, we are gently guided toward a broader perspective, where what once seemed fragmented begins to come together into a coherent pattern, evoking a sense of anticipation for the next revelation. As we approach the final stage of our exploration, the veil over ABRAXAS seems to thicken, not to obscure, but to reveal the depth of potential that lies in transcending our self-imposed limitations. The distinct facets we have explored, from his arcane origins to his modern reinterpretations, weave a continuous narrative about the quest for self-realization and understanding the true nature of power. The diverse streams of wisdom emanating from this figure invite us to go beyond superficial appearances, to delve into the depths of our own consciousness, and to recognize the underlying unity that connects all aspects of existence. The journey has prepared us for a moment of convergence, where diverse understandings align, pointing to a wisdom that resides not in a final destination, but in the very act of seeking and integrating, a movement that directs us with a renewed sense of purpose. The journey through the layers of ABRAXAS, from its ancient Gnostic echoes to its resonance in the work of ALEISTER CROWLEY, offers us more than a glimpse of a forgotten deity or an esoteric symbol. It presents us with a multifaceted mirror of existence itself, reflecting the totality of our capabilities and the intrinsic complexity of our human journey. ABRAXAS is not just a name engraved on ancient gems or a controversial figure on the margins of mystical history. He is an archetypal principle that invites us to transcend the limiting dichotomies that often imprison us. The rigid separation between light and shadow, good and evil, the sacred and the profane. Crowley's reinterpretation, which saw in ABRAXAS the sum of all things, the archetype of true will realized, challenges us to embrace the totality of our own nature. He reminds us that the potential for personal divinity lies not in the denial or repression of our so-called dark impulses and characteristics, but in their understanding, conscious integration, and channeling into the authentic expression of our unique purpose in the universe. The wisdom embedded in the number 365, associated with ABRAXAS, echoes the totality of the cosmic cycle and the vastness of life's experiences. It is not about finding a single absolute truth, but about recognizing the immanence of the divine in all facets of reality, from the precise laws of physics to the most visceral energies of our psyche. Science provides us with the map of the universe, while arcane wisdom, personified in figures like ABRAXAS, offers us the compass to navigate it, guided by our true will. By dismantling the artificial distinction between the sacred and the profane, we realize that every act, every moment, lived with full awareness and alignment, can become a form of worship and manifestation of the divine. The power inherent in understanding ABRAXAS is not a power of external domination, but rather internal sovereignty, the mastery over oneself that allows for authentic expression and the unique contribution of each individual to the greater ecosystem of existence. It is an invitation for the search for knowledge to be inseparable from the search for self-knowledge, and for the development of our capabilities to be guided by a deep sense of purpose and integrity. True practice, therefore, lies not in seeking external answers or adhering to dogma, but in embarking on the inner journey of integration and self-acceptance. ABRAXAS reminds us that fulfillment is found in wholeness, not in superficial perfection. The courage to embrace our shadows, to recognize the creative energy that resides even in our most challenging experiences, and to allow our true will to guide our actions, is the path to authentic fulfillment. The final lesson emanating from this enigmatic figure is a call to the courage to be fully who we are, in all our complexity, duality, and magnificence. ABRAXAS's exploration leaves us not with an end, but with a new beginning, an invitation to live with the wisdom that we are reflections of the cosmos, capable of manifesting divinity in every aspect of our existence. Practice begins now, in the act of embracing wholeness,